to listen to some really great information that you're going to get today. I just want to start the call off real quick and explain that the director of admission at Carnegie Mellon got roped into an important president's meeting. So he will try to join us a little bit later, but we hope to see him shortly. In the meantime, we're going to go ahead and start without him, just so that we make sure we get a lot of the content in place. So bear with me 1 second while I get our PowerPoint ready. And just nuts and bolts reminder to go ahead and ask your questions as soon as you have them. That way we'll have enough time to hopefully address most of them. For those of you who are on YouTube, you may ask the questions on YouTube as well, and we'll make sure that those get passed along. So without further ado, let's just get started.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Kristen Tishner, and I am here wearing two hats. I am representing WPI in the greater Boston area of Massachusetts, and I am also representing a national consortium of science and engineering colleges and universities, and I'll talk to you more about that later. That's got the acronym of CACHE, the College Admissions Collaborative Highlighting Engineering and Technology. Quick note about WPI. We are a mid-sized research university with roughly 5,000 undergraduate students and another few thousand students pursuing master's degrees and doctoral degrees in all things science and engineering related. And it's a residential campus about an hour from Boston.
Okay, then it's up to me. Welcome. My name is Peter Osgood. I'm the Director of Admission at Harvey Mudd College. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Harvey Mudd. There are very few powerhouse STEM programs that are also undergraduate only, and we would fit the bill for that. We have a distinctive kind of personality because we are a STEM school that is also a liberal arts college. We are driven by a clear sense of purpose. We are a mission-driven institution, and that mission completely affects all of our activity, but in particular, the academic program the students follow. And that purpose is to make sure that we produce well-rounded and socially aware scientists, mathematicians, and engineers who want to understand the impact of their work on society. We are also distinctive as a member of the Claremont colleges. They're in our town of Claremont, which is about 50 kilometers east of Los Angeles. We are joined by 6 other institutions that are literally across the street from one another. So a student at one college can take courses, eat meals, make friends across the street with neighbors from the other schools. We're also a very diverse school. The last several classes have been almost exactly 50-50 male and female. This is something we take a great deal of pride in. And we require research of every single student to graduate. So if you're interested in research, we would fit the bill there. So our next slide is of Carnegie Mellon, and we will make space for Greg to talk about his wonderful institution. If you don't know Carnegie Mellon, I don't know how that's possible, but there you have it. Amazing school in Pittsburgh. But we're gonna now move to the presentation, and that will drive, we hope, some of your questions. And the first slide is largely to tell you what we're going to cover. I think you can all pretty well read this, so I don't need to read it back to you. But the next slide will tell us that college courses are just different than high school. As an example, whether it's STEM or not, students are typically in courses in college in the neighborhood of 15 to 18 hours a week or so, which is really different from the amount of time that you might spend at your high school. But it means for each hour that you're in class, you have a lot more work to do. And the learning style is very, very different. The way the information is delivered might be very different in college than it is in your secondary school. The classes won't meet every day. There's more onus on you to do your own reading and your own discovery with it. And well, there tends to be a heavy emphasis on learning by doing, and that's the lab component. So in labs in particular, I think if a secondary school has only a short period of time to do a lab, that's quite different from a university lab, which might be a whole afternoon, so that you can make mistakes and start over and learn from that sense of discovery is going to be very important in the lab. So a heavy emphasis on the lab work. Then if we go on to the next slide, you'll see also that the courses are how they're taught. They can be in large lectures. That seems to be efficient. There often are recitation sections, and sometimes those are, in particular, larger universities might be taught by graduate students rather than just the professor him or herself. The grading might be quite different. The professor might not discuss what's in the book. This third line here, I think, is important to know, and this is a strong pitch for you students interested in STEM, whether you're going to be, you're committed to STEM as a major or not, to please start with STEM. So many courses, particularly at the beginning and intermediate level of science, are vertical. What I mean by that is you're not going to jump into differential equations until you've already completed calculus and multivariable calculus. Same thing in chemistry. You're not going to just pop into physical chemistry. You're going to have to take general chemistry first and probably organic chemistry. So it's vertical. And so you have to stack these courses on top of each other. Whereas if you're a politics or a philosophy major, not to demean them, those are great disciplines, but you could be a politics student and you could take US constitutional law, political theory courses, all at the same time, and the comparative politics, all at the same semester. And it's harder to do those sometimes in STEM. So please start with STEM.
I'll chime in very quickly to share just one other adjustment you should have in the back of your mind as you think about college STEM versus high school, and that is the pace. So the pace is much quicker at the college level. Faculty generally expect that you will put in the right number of hours outside of the classroom to keep up. But they are available for assistance, and there are typically some type of tutoring services available to students who need to seek out additional help. So by and large, on all of these college campuses, certainly this is true for WPI, Harvey Mudd, and Carnegie Mellon, there are support services available to students, but the onus is on you to seek out those support services, and you should expect to move very quickly through the curriculum.
Excellent. Okay. Thank you, Kristen. Another part, if we go to the next slide, another point I'd like to make is that the courses, the students that these courses tend to attract are students who have a real enthusiasm for STEM. And so they're going to be, putting a lot of work. And so, by some sort of comparison, that's what that contributes to that pace that Kristen was talking about. So the material might come at you pretty quickly. You have to be ready to do well with that. And so the next slide gives you some tips. So one of my suggestions is to work in teams. There have been studies done that show that students who work collaboratively, who go either independently or take use of the setup of the course to work collaboratively, are more successful than the students who try to slog it on their own. So please, and you'll find a lot of colleges wanting to model that. I think all the colleges here will have some representation of working in teams. But that is really, really essential. It also is a sign of strength for you to be a bit humble and to ask for help, whether that's of the tutoring programs, the professor's office hours, fellow students. Be resourceful with that. And the other is to persevere. Scientists learn by failing. I have a couple of quotes from Thomas Edison. One is, our greatest weakness lies in giving up. The most certain way to succeed is always to try just one more time. And then, of course, this great inventor also said, I have not failed. I have found just 10,000 ways that don't work. So with that in mind, there's a lot of discovery in science, and we hope that you'll be enthusiastic about it as we are for you as you go into your university studies. All right, so the next slide, why STEM is important. Well, I mean, think of how technology has changed society. And we got wearable technology now. How much does, at least if you've been following anything politically in this country, does technology affect things like politics? Of course it does. Does it work in reverse? Of course it does. The economy, the STEM is a driver for the economy, good or bad. What companies are thriving right now are high-tech companies, if you look at the stock market. But social media, the arts, fashion, all these things influence STEM and are influenced by it. So it's not like STEM operates in some sort of silo. It is deeply ingrained in the human condition. So if you think just of how we're communicating in this session itself, how is technology important? This is just a great example of it. So, so that's one of the reasons why STEM is important, aside from it just being flat out cool. And the next slide will tell us that it's also the case that STEM careers tend to be incredibly efficient in promoting leadership and innovation. And so that's exciting as well, because you can anticipate not doing the same job for decades and decades. That there will always be some new wrinkle to it, and it will be an exciting pathway for you. If you look at how technology is constantly adapting, how you can be working in one project, finish that one, pivot to a completely different project. That's a big part of what STEM does as well. I repeat here, the perseverance and the learning how to failing your way to success. So by the way, there's good, that's fine, that's great to move on to the next slide. This is all, STEM careers also tend to reward people quite nicely. The pay is usually very good. There are more jobs created in STEM right now, probably twice as many as in non-STEM industries. It's fast growing. The STEM median income, at least in our country, for people in STEM occupations was about $87,000 versus non-STEM a little less than $40,000. So that says something right there. Not that you have to be, focused on the financial, but that certainly will be something that plays out for you. So the other thing I want to tell you, the next slide, is that STEM is everywhere, and there are all kinds of different careers. It's very easy to think that someone who's trained in, say, one particular STEM discipline is locked in. Often, if you were to ask someone, what could a mathematician possibly do aside from becoming a teacher or a professor, it's actually quite a lot. One of my favorite conversations was with a political campaign manager flying across the country several years ago. And we were talking about how important are mathematicians so they can interpret, can understand where to put their resources to get the greatest number of votes. And there were mathematical algorithms and computer algorithms for this. So it's how pharmaceutical companies determine how they're going to, or someone who sells you toothpaste, how they're going to determine how to set their market and what prices to charge. There's going to be mathematicians involved in that. But of course, it's a really, really wide field. People in STEM are going to be able to cross-train and find themselves working in all kinds of different pathways. So the other point I'd like to make is that STEM careers, I think this is the last slide that I'm going to talk and then turn it over to Kristen, Gloria, is that there are a lot of misconceptions about STEM careers, and just be open to take the pathways that are going to be available to you with STEM. The more you can build your foundation in understanding some of the basics of these fields and study in an interdisciplinary way, the stronger you'll be later on in life. So with that, I think it's time for me to arrest my speaking and give it to Kristen to talk about some important issues in STEM. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Hello, everyone again. And I'm going to pick up where Peter left off first by mentioning that the high demand for STEM jobs and the fact that there are so many career options available to you if you have a background in STEM are all great reasons to focus on a science or engineering related undergraduate program, and then choose to pursue whatever your heart desires for your graduate studies, your master's degree or your doctoral degree, if you choose to go in that direction, or perhaps a Master of Business Administration or a law degree. And the reason for that is it is much easier to start with a technical foundation and then add on non-technical expertise than it is to do the reverse. So if you're somewhat undecided about what pathway to pursue, I strongly recommend that you start in STEM and then go in other directions, because STEM can be a wonderful door opening opportunity for you, whatever your career path may be. And that's a good segue into the conversation about women in STEM. So interestingly, even though women make up more than half of the college educated workforce in the world, only a third of the workforce in science and engineering, actually less than the third, 29% to be exact, are women. So women are underrepresented in these fields, and yet they bring enormous perspective and insight. While women tend to focus more on the life sciences, they are in great demand in some of the other STEM fields, such as computer science or the physical sciences. I'm ready for the next slide. So if you look at this breakdown of degrees conferred upon the women in STEM from the United States, you can see the heavy tendency to pursue the life sciences, biological sciences, versus mathematics and statistics, or computer science, or any of the engineering disciplines. The interesting thing is that women tend to be more holistic problem solvers. They tend to be really strong in math and physical science. They often focus on fields where they believe they can make a difference. So women tend to want to help the environment or people or animals. And the truth of the matter is, sometimes the best way to make a contribution and help people and help society is through expertise in these more technical domains. So that's my little advertisement for pursuing the physical sciences or computer science if you're a female student. I'm ready for the next slide. Now, in general, I will share with you a broad-based education is really important. As you begin shopping for college, think about both breadth and depth. And what you want is to make sure that the college you attend will give you a broad-based background so that you will be prepared for whatever the future may hold. We have all seen crazy changes, unexpected developments over the last couple of months. And as you can see with what is happening to the economy right now, it's really important to have the kind of educational background that will help you be resilient and help you adapt to new changes. On many of our campuses, the fastest growing academic programs did not even exist 10 years ago. So you want to be working with faculty and other students who will prepare you for whatever the future may hold. Now, one thing I want to share is that you are evaluating colleges on the basis of a number of factors. One factor you should consider is how long it takes students to graduate and what percentage of students graduate in a timely way. These data here give you a sense of the percentage of students who graduate with a science and engineering degree based on the type of institution they attend. And what we want to point out, and we will confess to being biased, we all represent private institutions, is that if you attend a small or mid-sized private college or university, you are more likely to earn your bachelor's degree, to complete your degree, your undergraduate degree in science and engineering, and you're more likely to go on to graduate school in that domain. How do you make yourself a strong candidate for one of our schools or any of the other wonderful colleges and universities that specialize in science and engineering? I joke that you need to suffer as much as humanly possible over your 4 years of high school. So we really want to see that you have challenged yourself academically. You absolutely need to take as much mathematics as possible. We want you to also pursue a rigorous course of study in English and lab sciences. I will share with you just in general that we want to make sure your first year of college goes well. And so to the extent that you can push yourself in your senior year of high school, you will be that much better off as you make the transition. Next slide. If you can take time over the course of a summer or even during the academic year to experiment with some science and engineering coursework, that is available widely online these days. Talk to as many family, friends, neighbors as you can who are doing work in the science and engineering fields, just to get an idea of what that is all about and what you might want to choose as a major. And get good grades. That's all it takes. Now, before I talk about cachet, do we want to segue and give Greg a chance to introduce himself now that he's here?
Sure, I can do that. Everyone, I'm sorry I'm late. I do apologize, and thank you to Peter and Kristen for jumping in for me. My name is Greg Edelman, Associate Dean and Director of Admission at Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Carnegie Mellon is a medium-sized comprehensive research university focused on everything from math and computer science to musical theater, social and decision sciences, history. So we are kind of your one-stop shop for all your educational needs. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you all today. Again, I know I'm late, but I definitely look forward to answering any questions that you might have.
Awesome, thank you, Greg. So just to wrap up, we have a couple of slides talking about the College Admissions Collaborative, highlighting engineering and technology. We're part of a national group of institutions that care deeply about helping students to get into great schools like ours, to study STEM, to go on to work in these really important mission critical science and engineering fields and live happily ever after. So the next slide shows you a list of the many colleges and universities that are a part of CACHE. And what I hope you'll take away from this is a sense that there are so many opportunities for you. There is not just one place in the universe where you can get a great STEM education. There are lots and lots of different institutions, different sizes, different types, public, private, and these are just options within the US. So with that, we will transition to the Q&A section. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And to just start off, I think that while most people know the term STEM, and we talked a little bit about it, I think there's still some questions about like what is designated as a STEM program, a STEM field. And as we said, you know, now in this world, STEM is sort of like intersected with everything. So if any of you want to kind of weigh in a little bit on how a program is designated a STEM field.
Okay, my colleagues have muted themselves, so I guess I will.
That's because I really don't know the answer to it. So,
well, so I've done a little work in the accreditation space. So I think part of it is the applied nature of the work. So I mean, there is an official list of science and engineering courses and programs, and so part of it is straightforward. If you're taking computer science, that is a STEM discipline. If you're taking an engineering program of study, that is STEM. Where it gets a little tricky is, as one of our participants just asked, can a business and technology program be considered a STEM field? Yes, it can. And that's where I think it's a little tricky, because the STEM orientation typically means applied problem solving and using technology as part of that applied problem solving. So engineering, for example, at its heart is taking science and using it to solve problems. And so that is my best answer for the moment, but we're going to have to get better at that. Thanks for asking the question.
Well, and thank you. And as usual, after Tuesday Talks, we kind of send information out. And so if you all know kind of where that list is, maybe we can send that out as a resource for people if they have questions about that. So there are a number of questions about admissions. And as we have talked on many Tuesday Talks, one of the benefits of the US admissions process is the holistic review. That being said, I think there's still a lot of questions about kind of what that looks like. And I think a lot of students might say, what's the formula? How much weight is put on each section? And so if any of you want to kind of take a stab of how to approach that a bit, Peter, do you want to start?
Yeah, I would actually. So I think it's a common expectation that there's some, I know, there is some formula for selecting students, or some order that we're going to put students in. And oftentimes for students, particularly students from outside the US, but not only, they think that it's based on largely on examinations or marks, and not sort of the story, the narrative of the person. And we're very much focused in this holistic admission process to find out more about the students' motivations, the context of their learning, what opportunities have been available to them, what they've taken advantage of, where their interests fall and why. And it's much more of that story that motivates us. And I will say that there's another component to this, is that most of the students that apply to highly selective schools are really good students, and it gets very hard to parse the students out by some statistical measure. So a student who has, you know, an iota higher GPA than somebody else, or somebody who's taken 2 more AP courses than somebody else, it's not an arms race. It's more about finding the student who really fits the particular culture of the college. And colleges tend to flatter themselves thinking that they're so distinctive from one another, but we have very particular views about what we think means fit. And as a consequence, my recommendation for you students is to invest the time to find out a little bit how the college perceives itself, as well as for you to see how well it fits you, so that you can address that question better in your application.
Yeah, I think the challenge this year is going to be, I agree with Peter. I don't think what we're looking for is necessarily changed, but I think the lens in which we're going to have to find that has changed dramatically. So, Carnegie Mellon is very much a school that values collaboration and community engagement, and there's a lot of talk right now about how did COVID impact your high school curriculum? How did it impact standardized testing? But nobody's really talking about how did it impact the extracurricular activities, right? I mean, I think that is we're gonna see activities this year that maybe similar to academic majors 10 years ago we never would have thought even existed. But in this world that we're living in now, I think that you're really going to start to see students get creative in how they spent their free time. Being in Pittsburgh, I'm not sure if this is going to resonate with an international population, but Pittsburgh is home to somebody that is very famous in the United States named Mr. Rogers. And Mr. Rogers used to host a kids program for decades, and he was just a beloved figure in the United States. But he always said that in times of crisis, you look for the helpers. And I think that that's something that we're going to look at here. So how using your free time, was it spent playing video games, or was it spent trying to find new and exciting and creative ways to try and navigate the challenges that the entire world is facing at the same time here? So, unfortunately, I don't think I have an answer to your question in this next cycle. I think we're going to have to figure it out as we see the applications. But, I think what we're looking for is going to stay the same. Just how we're looking, I think, is going to be what changes.
One thing I did see asked about from a couple of people typing in is about the test optional situation. And so for some institutions like WPI, the admissions process is already set up to review candidates without test scores available, without the SAT or the ACT, for example, as part of the selection process. Other institutions, because of COVID-19 complications, are for the first time reviewing candidates without those test scores available. What I will share with you is that all of our institutions in general are lucky in the sense that we have fairly large admissions teams reviewing applications, and we are able to dive into all of your information, all of your application materials. We can read your personal statement. We have time to carefully review everything that your teachers and school counselors say about you. So I'm confident that all of us will be able to make good decisions about your candidacy without the benefit of those test scores. I think the real challenge is for much larger institutions that are reliant on those test scores to eliminate candidates from consideration or to immediately accept students.
Just to kind of build on that a little bit, I think that there's a misconception that when colleges evaluate test scores, that they put them in a spectrum, and we took the kids with the highest test scores, right? And like we took the top third or the top 10th of the SATs. For test scores, in some cases, what it helped us do was provide context to a student. So while we might see a student that has SATs that are below what we would consider to be our average for a program, we can see that maybe that student has SATs that are far above what is the average for their high school. So as you start to look at things like grit and growth mindset, to see a student that we would say is kind of like punching above their weight, had value for us in the application process. So when we say that we're SAT optional, again, it doesn't mean that we're quote unquote lowering what we're looking for, we're lowering our standards. It's just saying if requiring the test was a barrier to entry, we're very happy to remove that barrier if it encourages students to apply. But in some cases, submitting test scores could be advantageous to you in the process.
There is a question about that. And I think, over the course of Tuesday Talks, each week you have a new institution saying that they're test optional. I think there are questions about how to approach that decision, as some students already do have scores. How do you kind of decide whether or not it makes sense for you to send a test score? And I think you can answer that in kind of a greater context of, like, again highlighting kind of what it sort of looks like in an office when you look at all the materials provided. Greg mentioned context, so
Yeah, I mean, I've just quickly, I've been telling students, because we've been getting this question a lot, is we're looking for evidence that a student can be successful at Carnegie Mellon. If you choose not to submit your test scores, which is fine, but that is a data point that now we're losing. So if you feel confident that in the rest of your application, there's significant data points to point to the fact that you can be successful at Carnegie Mellon, then the decision is on you to submit the test. And I'm sure that there are counselors on this call saying, well, the SATs are not predictive of success in college anyway. And I completely agree, but it's a data point. And when we are getting, all of our institutions are those highly selective institutions, the more data points we have to make an accurate and informed decision helps us. So I would say, if you have a school counselor, trust your school counselor and work with them. But we're looking for successful completion of a secondary school performance and evidence that you'll be able to add to our community. And if you think you're able to do that without test scores, then that's great.
I'll also just note that every year, the National Association for all colleges that are accredited in the US, we all respond to a survey that asks us, what do we value most in the college admissions review process? And the number one answer is not test scores. The number two answer is not test scores. For highly selective schools, it's number three on the list. So number one is the rigor of your course program. And we know that you're all taking super challenging classes. Number two is grade performance. How are you doing academically in those classes day in and day out? And number three on that national survey is always the standardized test scores. So I just want to remind you that for all of us, even in the very beginning when we didn't have to worry about COVID-19, test scores were third on the list and were not as useful to us in our decision-making as the nature of the courses you are taking and then your grade performance in those classes.
So in light of what you said about data points, Greg, and also just in terms of even academic rigor and such, with COVID, some schools now, this last semester were pass fail. And so I think a question is, what other data points could show quantitative success and rigor that may not be available in your grades or scores? And there was someone who asked, for example, like Coursera courses, online courses, are those helpful to you? Are those things that you would consider in your review?
I think what's challenging here is navigating this post-COVID-19, well, I guess it's not post, we're right in the thick of it here, this COVID-19 world, while still trying to maintain an equitable admission process, right? So once we start to say and encourage students to do things like Coursera or to take classes at a college online that could have a significant cost to it, those kind of opportunities aren't available to all students. And now we start to disadvantaging students by advantaging others. So, I think it's hard for me to say, go out and take Coursera classes, when in reality, I can't say definitively that that's going to have any more value than a student that is able to write a creative essay is going to in the admission process. I think some of this is, we just don't know what the applicant pool is going to look like. And, I think that we'll have to kind of navigate it as we're going to have to fly the plane or build the plane as we're flying it, I think it's the saying. So
is there anything that
it's
perhaps, sorry.
No, good.
Oh, I just was saying, is there anything that perhaps counselors that are on this call, counselors or teachers, could do to kind of help provide more context for you with regards to kind of the changes that have
Yeah,
happened?
I mean, I think it's going to have to be things like the letters of recommendation, to be honest. You know, and I think some of it too is seeing a student's curriculum. While we might not have grades, I think it points to the fact that they were successful or maybe not successful in previous year's curriculum. You know, if you're taking those higher level STEM classes to get to that level, you had to have a successful track record moving forward. So I honestly wish I had a better answer, and I think I'm just going to stop talking here because I can't get out of the corner I put myself in. But honestly, I think some of it is we don't know yet.
I'd like to give students and teachers and counselors the idea that it's okay. It's okay for you not to feel like you've got to achieve. In these times, it's more important to be healthy, to have try to maintain a good attitude. Greg mentioned helping others. That's something I think we're going to be keyed on a lot in this next selection process. And to a degree, there's a lot of concern about how do I get in and how do I make myself look like the person that they're going to select. And the colleges, interestingly enough, are more interested in the students, are hearing about the students who have genuine motivations for it rather than doing something to make themselves look good to our admission process. The more we can find sort of genuine, authentic voice, and for you to identify the things that you're excited about and to spend some time pursuing those are going to, those should resonate with us. Whether that's taking, because you love to learn certain kinds of material, take a Coursera course, whether we get a grade for it or not, the fact that you pursue it is going to show that intent. If it's a way that you make contributions to other people's lives, or maybe you have to take care of a family member, those are all valued kinds of contributions. And it's the human story, I think, that we're going to be focused on significantly more in this coming admission cycle.
Great, thank you for that perspective. We're going to shift gears just slightly, and let's talk a little bit about, we've talked about, I guess, personality a bit, the personalities of schools and also the fit piece. So there are some questions about essays and extracurriculars. And are you in showcasing personality? I think some students tend to think that all of their application kind of needs to be related to what they want to study, particularly if they wanted to study STEM. And I guess, could you weigh in on like when that makes sense and when maybe you should pivot from your major, your intended major, in your application material?
I think the essay is a great chance to tell us a little bit about yourself. We love hearing about what students are excited about, and frankly, you're likely to excel in areas that you're passionate about. So if you think you want to major in, let's say, biomedical engineering, but you tell us about someone who is a role model for you, your favorite teacher, or something you've done outside of school that excites you, that will give us insights about who you are as a person. And it will help us because we're trying to bring together lots of people to be a part of our campus community. And we welcome that personal information.
If I can add this, I'm going to make a hypothetical. Let's say I was working in the admission office at a medical school or at an MBA program or a law school. Can you imagine if I were at that medical school, how many applicants I might see to our medical school who majored in biology or biology and chemistry? So they're going to start seeming fairly much alike. And then along comes a student who actually majored in classics. And like, what is this person doing here? But they've done all these other things to pursue their medical. They've taken the right courses. They've taken organic chemistry and calculus and all these courses that they need So they've got the academic preparation that we seek, but they're approaching medical school from perhaps a perspective. And I think that person is going to get my attention very quickly. And now I'm interested in the story behind a student's pathway to medical school. And I just think there's a way for students to stand out by communicating their story and what excites them in that way, and not necessarily all finding a way to do robotics competitions virtually or something like that. I mean, we want you to do what you want to do, and we're just interested in why you're motivated in that way.
Yeah, just 2 quick points. We're going to have valedictorians apply for admission. We're going to have perfect standardized test scores apply for admission. We're going to have students that have started their own companies apply for admission. And that's great. But the only way we would ever enroll at Peter Osgood is if Peter Osgood applies for admission. And so I think you want to be as true to yourself as you possibly can be, because if we're really looking for Peter Osgood, you might have all the other things that we're looking for, except for that it factor. And that it factor could just very well be something that is so unique and specific to you. So I think it's hard to say what we look for in the admission process, because honestly, I think for the more selective schools, we don't know it until we see it. But when we see it, we definitely recognize it. The other thing I'd say too with the essays is answer the question. Okay. It doesn't matter what you want to tell us. It matters what we're asking you. So it actually got to the point last year, we dropped the essay from our application because the question was, what do you want to study? And it became a Wikipedia page. It was a research paper on Carnegie Mellon, and it added nothing to the application. So we changed it to, there's a few short answer questions, but one of them was, what was that eureka moment that led to you wanting to study what you want to study? Because it is so true and specific to the student. But I can't tell you how many times we see essays that end in the sentence, that's why I've always wanted to go to Cornell. And I mean, and that alone isn't necessarily going to knock a student off, but it's clear then that our question is so specific to us that there's no way they could have recycled effectively an essay from another school. So just answer the question.
Well, also what both Peter and Greg have said, I hope helps you realize that the person writing your essay needs to be you. We want to hear from you. We want it to be in your voice. We want you to tell your story in your words. That's what we want.
And so do you all have any tangible kind of concrete advice on how to figure out a college's uniqueness? I mean, obviously going to your website, but I think sometimes that's overwhelming. So do you have any kind of tips on what are some powerful ways to kind of understand a campus, a community, an environment?
I think what's interesting for us is 60% of our applicants are what are considered to be stealth applicants. So they were never on our inquiry file. We'd never reached out to these students, but they're still finding information that exists out there that is appealing towards Carnegie Mellon. So in doing a deeper dive in it, you know, I wish I had a higher tech solution, but honestly, if you just YouTube Carnegie Mellon, some of the videos that current students have put out talking about their experience, love it or hate it, it's their experience. And I think us in the college admission world want to put out these super polished marketing pieces, but in reality, it's these little 3-minute vignettes that were organically generated by current students that seem to resonate for whatever reason with prospective students.
Peter, did you want to add something? I saw you start.
The only other thing that I think may be valuable is, as I mentioned before, I think colleges sometimes have a particular view of what they think is essential to the institution. And I think Greg's point's a very good one. Those vignettes can give a great sense of culture and personality. But it may be worthwhile actually not just looking at the college's website, but actively joining the inquiry list so they get the information that is from the admission office, but it does try to communicate how that college sees itself. And that can influence how you perceive that fit to that institution.
Great, thank you. So you mentioned some of the updates already. I think there are still some questions like, do we expect ED deadlines to change? Are there any? So do you have any updates, recent updates that you want to mention?
Some
We still don't know a whole lot.
Okay.
So
some
It's a very
colleges,
dynamic situation.
some colleges have announced that they're going to move their deadlines. Others are, I think more are in the camp that Greg mentioned, that we're like still figuring things out. So we've not had any discussions about that at our institution. I think there's just one of the key words, two key words that are coming from the leadership at our institution. One is pivot and the other is grace. And I think those are very good key words for us to live by in these times.
There is one question about demonstrated interest, or like, do you give more consideration to people who do get on your inquiry list or email you or whatever? And I think that different universities and colleges in America, treat that differently. So each of you can kind of talk about what that means, if it means anything for your institution.
no,
For Carnegie Mellon, no demonstrated interest. Got
we
it.
don't. Yeah, I mean, if we go to a college fair, we don't even collect names, so we don't track demonstrated interest at all.
Ditto. Same
I,
for WPI.
my answer is reflective of a time when students could actually come to our campus. And the only time that it might have had some influence if a student was extremely local and had good resources so they could actually be to our campus and not taken any initiative to know really much about our culture, that might be reflective of the student's application. But even last year or 2 or 3 years ago, a student from distance, I'd never hold that expectation for that student. That's just unfair. Or a student who was local who didn't have much resources. So I think that question is going to be, I think this time is going to be very difficult for colleges to suss that out and to figure out how students can show their undying affection to that particular institution. I think that's a very difficult model to build. And I think
So those of you who want to get on the inquiry list, you
Yeah,
get on the inquiry list for you, not for getting in, but for you to
how
understand.
do I know who else I can't possibly know that. I can't know where else you've applied. I just think the more that if we start trying to get inside the students' heads, that's a really wasted amount of energy. I think that's really, really foolish for like to try and anticipate what students are going to decide. There's so many factors in it. And I think if the students are therefore trying to figure out what's inside our heads, now it becomes this ridiculous game. And again, we've said several times, we're looking for students to come out in their application as being authentic. Their motivations are where their enthusiasms lie or their curiosities lie. They may not have produced a whole lot, but they just have, hey, I'm curious about this. And I started looking into it. And I think your institution might be able to help me on my pathway. So please consider this.
Great, thank you. Well, we have a little bit of time left, and I just wanted to know if each of you kind of had some final words or final like takeaways, encouragement, anything you'd like to say as kind of a final.
I'll get on my soapbox like I do every Tuesday talk and say it's very important to remember that in this process, integrity matters. We want to see your work moving forward. If you are using an agent or paying somebody to complete your application for you, you are playing a very dangerous game. While you might submit 20 applications, we are seeing literally tens of thousands every year, and it is easier to spot an inauthentic application than you might think. And if there is any whiff that the work is not yours, the documents were forged, You did not write your own essays. That's not a good place to be in the admission process. So I said it before, each school's application is going to be slightly different. Answer the questions, be as true to yourself as you possibly can be, right? And I think the beautiful thing about the education system in the United States is there is a school for everyone. And if you want to go to school in the United States, you can go to school in the United States. I think students should shift their perspective of what a good school is and realize that all the institutions are good in their own right. And it might not be exactly what you're looking for, but at the same time, you might not know what you're looking for until you step foot on that college campus as an incoming first-year student. So integrity matters, and be as true to yourself as you can be in this process.
I'll go next then. This is more of a tip for college, but it could also relate to your secondary school experience. Relationships matter, and particularly in your first year of college, reach out to a professor, develop a relationship with that person as a perhaps mentor for you. When it comes time for you to pursue a research opportunity or that exciting internship, to have a professor on your side is like gold. And that may even happen at your secondary school experience, to really connect with a teacher in a way that shows your a genuine enthusiasm in what the teacher is trying to convey. And that can help in those recommendations.
I'll close out by sharing with you 9 words that we share with all of our incoming students their first day. So these are the magic 9 words everyone hears over and over again their freshman year at WPI. Go to class. Do the work. Ask for help. And those seem like really obvious suggestions, especially for how smart our students are. And yet we have to remind them many, many times. So you really need to show up, put in the time and energy. And for most of you, I think the hardest part will be asking for help. And I'm telling you now, all of you, at some point during your college experience, you will be better off if you ask for help. And there are people there to help you. So don't suffer alone and don't suffer silently. Ask for help.
Thank you so much for those comments. And we know that like college application process is super stressful, really overwhelming. There's a lot of temptation to kind of play the game. And especially now with things being so uncertain, there's even more stress. So we do want to encourage all of you once again to take a breath, really kind of find moments where you can find sanity, really help one another, understand each other, have conversations. Like Peter said, relationships matter. Like now is the time to be authentic. It's not the time to try to play a game, try to figure out the formula. Be yourself. That's what all these institutions really want to see in your application. So once again, thank you so much, Peter, Kristen, and Greg, for spending time with us today, for answering our questions, for giving us an understanding of STEM and your institutions. I encourage everybody who's here, go ahead and take down this information, get on those inquiry lists so that you can understand the institutions better. Now is a time when there's more information than there ever was about institutions. So take advantage of that. And we will send you more details as we go. We have one more Tuesday talk next week before we take a little bit of a summer break, and then we'll be back again in August. So thank you once again for spending time with us, and have a good afternoon, evening, morning, wherever you are. Take care. Bye, everyone.